Hello guys, welcome back. Hope you all are good and have watched the previous video, The Habitat. If not, please go and watch it. The reason why I'm repeatedly telling you to watch all the videos and not to skip anyone, because everything is very important, because as I told you earlier, basics are very important to understand the complex topic. So I want all of you to watch the the videos that I've put so far. And in this video, we'll be watching the niche, what is a niche, and how each and every individual species has its own niche, and what are gills, what are ecological equivalents. So all these things we'll be discussing in this video. So while watching the video, make sure that you have a note and pen and take notes, and that will help you to understand it. Once you've finished watching this video, please go on read the part which is given in your book. So let us learn about niche. So what does this word niche means? So it's quite confusing. Many people get confused with this word niche and what it actually means. But it is very simple. So in simple, we can say it is a nest. Okay, nest means what? A small house of a bird, right? So its own house. So before we get to know more about this niche, let us recall about the habitat. So we learned that habitat is a place where organisms live, and every organism has its own unique habitat, right? So we have seen that in desert we have camels. So according to its environmental condition, it has adapted to live in that, right? To survive, to make sure that the species doesn't go into extinction. It has adapted and has its own unique habitat, which means you can only find the camels in the deserts, right? And of course, nowadays you can find camels in different areas, but originally and the species where it is evolved is from the desert. And you also have different animals. So, like every animal has its own habitat, the own place to it to live. Every animal also has its own physical space in the environment. So, what do I mean by physical space in the environment? So in simple, it interacts with the species of other members in the community. That includes competition for the food as well as competition for the house and predations. It goes and feed upon other organisms, parasitism and mutualism. In simple, we can say niche. Every animal has its own niche. What do I mean? Every organism has its own niche. In simple, what it eats, what it eats, where it lives, and how it reproduces, and how it associate with the community, that and how it predate. All these things simply we can say niche. So, in simple, we can say the sum total of its environmental requirements. I'll be talking more further about niche with picture examples so that you guys will understand in a better way. But in simple, know what is niche. Niche means every organism has its own physical space. In simple, what it eats, where it lives, how it reproduces, and everything has according to its own specific physical space in the habitat it lives. So we'll be seeing that in the picture later. Okay, and he is the person Charles Elton was the first to use this term niche in 1927, and he says that niche is a functional status of an organism in a community. So what is functional status of an organism in a community? Like what it does, what its functional role in the community. For example, animals feed, reproduce, and how it recycled, how it organized properly, all these things. Okay, so let's see that in detail. So before that, let me just give you here. So it is a coastal habitat. It's a coastal environment. Say, for example, a beach. So every animal you see here, all of them are birds. Okay, all of them are from the same category, birds. Okay, so they all have its own physical space for feed to get its food. They don't compete with each other. Say, for example, these plovers they hunt for small insects in the beach. And if you take these oyster catchers, they only prey upon the small shells that is on the shallow region. And if you take these avocets, they feed on only insects. So you can see they have their own physical space for its feeding instead of competing with each other. So no two species will have same niche. What do I mean? They will not compete for food each other. Even if there is a competition, then there comes another principle of exclusion. So which you don't want to know about it, but still know what it is. Okay. So all the animals have its own adaptation according to its requirement, environmental requirement. It needs food. If you take these flamingos, they have a very long a neck that helps them to feed or to get its own food in the deeper region instead of competing with other birds. So this is what we call in simple niche. So remember what is niche again. In simple, in a very simple way, if you have to put it, what it eats, how it reproduces, where it lives. Okay. So if you look at this picture, you can see it's a forest. Okay, it is a habitat. Okay, it's not a two or three habitat, it's a only single habitat. And in single habitat, or I mean this single habitat is a home for all these bird species. Okay, so understand up to this, it's a home for all these bird species. So if you look at all these birds, all of these birds have its own niche, which means its own physical space where it will live and it will eat, it will reproduce. It will not compete with other birds. As you can look at from this picture, in the grassland, this grasshopper and eastern meadow lark. So these birds lives and reproduce, eat its foods. So all these have its own physical environment. It is not competing with other birds. Likewise, some birds have nest on the top of the trees and some birds will have nest on the in the middle portion of the tree so that it can avoid competition. Okay, so you can now you can get it right. In simple, every individual organism has its own niche, which means it has its own preference towards its food, towards its place where it lives, so that it can avoid competition and live happily, right? And there are some exceptional cases. Sometimes competition happens for niches. So two species, if there are two species that shares the same or niches, like same niches, then there comes the principles of exclusion. They predate upon each other, like cannibalism sometimes takes place, and they will exclude the competition. So in other cases, there are animals. If you look at this picture, let me just give you this example here. It's a pine tree. You can see all these birds are from different species, but somehow they have adapted to avoid the competition, has its own niche living in this particular region below the yellow rumped warble. It feeds in the lower part of the tree and at the bases of the middle branches. So it just goes and feeds whatever available insects or anything that it goes and feeds there. So and it lives, it build it nest in here. So likewise, this bird lives in this portion and this bird will live on the top of the tree, so that they have their own niches instead of competing with each other. Some animals lives in the same habitat and also share same common characteristics in terms of niche. What do I mean? So if you look at this picture, so you can see these two birds have the same niche, which means they have the same feeding habit. So they feed upon the same group of animals. So to avoid competition, they have developed their own niches by adapting itself according to the place or habitat it lives. Say for example, this owl, it feeds only on the daytime, and this owl, it feeds only on the night time. So they have two different hunting behavior. So this is completely nocturnal. It goes and feeds on night time. It goes and feeds on daytime. And there is a competition. Though the competition is there, they have avoided by adapting to live to adapt itself into different environmental condition, so that it can avoid sharing the same ecological niche. Okay, so I hope you guys got what is niche. Now let's see further about in niche what types are there. Okay, so let us see further with other example. Okay, so let's take a scenario. It's the same habitat, and we have a species that comes from the same common ancestor. Okay, share the common ancestor, and also have the same feeding habit. So we have already seen that with previous example, right? With owl. So the owl species adapted a different behavior so that it can avoid sharing the same niche. So here you have this grasshopper. This grasshopper will be very active during daytime, and it will be feeding, and it will have its own niche. And the cricket, it will be very active during the night time, hence it is known as nocturnal species, right? So it just goes and feeds during the night time and avoid competition sharing the same niche with this grasshopper. And during the daytime it will be hiding under the trees and it will be inactive, but this species will be active. So now you can understand, right? Even if they are living in the same habitat and having the same feeding mechanism, they will avoid sharing the same niche by adapting into a different behavior. Okay, let's see. So let's go with an example from the aquatic habitat. It just this niche pattern or the niche phenomenon goes and common for all animals or all organisms that lives in different habitat. So if you take this pond, you have three fishes. Okay, so they all have their own niches. Say if you take the surface feeder, the cutla, it has its own niche by feeding upon the surface available food, hence its mouth is up terminal. Okay, so the mouth is positioned towards its upper side of the head so that it can grasp or grab food that is available on the surface. Likewise, if you look at this rohu, this fish is rohu, its mouth is somewhat equal or equally positioned towards its head, so it feeds on the food that it has on the in this middle region. And we have Mirgal, which is otherwise known as bottom feeder. So it according to its requirement, the place it has, like the niche that it has. So it has a own unique niche by eating food that present in the benthic habitat instead of competing with these two species. And also according to its requirement, the mouth also has changed, which is known as inferior mouth. So the mouth is somewhat below the head so that it can feed upon the bottom fecal matters and other detritus. Okay, so this is how animals have their own niche and also avoid competition. Okay, so let's see more about these niches. So let us learn more about niche. Okay, the word guild means, so in ecology you have a terminology guilds. Okay, so the word guild mean many. Okay, many people or many animal or many organisms. So let us see the definition of guilds first. Group of species with comparable role and niche dimensions within a community are termed guilds. So you know what is a niche? Niche means every individual species will have its own niche, which means it will have its own style, lifestyle of feeding, of food, sleeping, or finding a home, or migrating. All these things will be unique to particular individual organisms. Then we call that as a niche. So that is why we say every individual species has its own niche. No two species will not share same niche. Even if they have similar pattern of feeding, again they will avoid by changing its behavior. Say for example, if two animals are having the same feeding mechanisms, like feeding on mice. So the owl I gave you, which I gave you in the previous slide, the owl will go and feed on mice. So you have two different owl species are there, and two different owl species are living in the same habitat. So to avoid sharing the same niche, one owl will be nocturnal, which means it will go and feed during night time, go and feed or catch this mice and eat. And another owl which will be very active during daytime, it will go and catch mice and eat. Okay, in gills you will have group of species that will be sharing or like utilizing the resources in a comparable way or related way. So let me tell you how it happens. If you take scavengers, okay, so let me just show you this picture. These are the scavengers that present in a forest. Okay, let's take this as a forest. And in this forest you have many types of scavengers. So all these animals all comes under the same category, scavengers. They clean the environment by eating the dead matter or decomposing matters, right? So all of them are sharing the environmental resource, okay, in a relatable way, comparable way. They don't share their own niche, okay, they're not actually having the same niche. All of them clean the environment and have its own niche already, but still in a relatable way. So this is what we call gills, okay. And what are ecological equivalents? So species that occupy the same niche in different geographical regions are termed ecological equivalents. So what does it actually mean? So these two species are living in two different region on our planet Earth. Say for example, this Mantella frog lives in Madagascar and this poison dot frog lives in Central America. So these two species have same niche, which means the way it feeds, the way it reproduces, the way it build its nest, the place where it lives, all of them is same, but they all two apart and living in two different geographical locations. So these are called ecological equivalents. I hope you guys understand or understood about what is niche, what are gills, and what are ecological equivalents. So this is about niche. So if you still have any doubts, do ask me your doubts. Note it down on the notebook and see to it that you will ask this doubt during our online class. Take care, guys.